Chapter 13, Rivalries, Part 2, That's all a lie. Naruto threw his hands to the bars and gripped them until his knuckles were white with strain. Sasuke would never want to be that way. You brainwashed him. Oh, are you sure there weren't any telltale signs of his hatred? I'm pretty sure he's always felt that way after the death of his clan. Toby just shook his head. Naruto, when will you ever learn that it's not all about you? Sasuke chose his path and therefore, he will walk it despite whatever you tell him. Your depiction of this Uchiha is far off than you have ever believed. All you are speaking is only what a child would believe. You shut your mouth, you bastard. Naruto twisted his gaze to the paper angel. The glaze over her eyes and the sheer distaste that showed from her mouth could only prove of malice that never washed away, no matter how many days that passed her by. The memories haunted her, and her regret has only further pushed her to her mental limits. This was the look of a warrior, a person raised on the means to survive. The memories of what she was before she joined Naruto and his village came rushing back to the orange-haired Genin, and for a moment, there was a time that he believed that maybe things would have been different had he not saved her. What gives you the right to decide what the Uchiha wants to believe? Conan replied in monotone, I can guarantee that you have something to do with the Uchiha's change of heart. Just as you changed Nagato, or better yet, how you played with their emotions to gain an advantage in your sick twisted plan. I know all about it, Madara. Toby was amused at this woman's constant interference. Perturbed for a split second, the feeling faded as quickly as it came. However, through his musing, he was entertained by Conan's interruption. Interesting, I didn't do anything. I only spoke the truth and let him decide on his own. Nagato was treated the same way and made up his own mind as well. He just decided on a way that benefits my plan, he replied smugly. Although, he already knew that he instigated their decisions, however minor his notions were. He couldn't have them changing their minds now, could he? Not possible. I didn't even have to do anything to Nagato anyway. In the end, he was a fool, although, it's not as if it really matters. He's dead, or did it just slip your mind? I could just say that maybe he was into my idea from the get-go. I could also tell you that there was a moment when he wanted you dead. Conan flinched in surprise. Nagato wanted her dead? That couldn't be possible. Nagato and I have been friends since we were little. I have never done anything to Nagato to make him hate me as you say. There was a further indentation on her brow. Toby chuckled in a casual cackle that would only seem darker than anything else. I suppose you're right. Nagato would never be so evil as to do something that would harm his precious person. In reality, he was too weak to even realize his own faults, calling himself a god. He even had the Kyuubi within his reach, and he let him slip by just from a simple conversation. Actually, this would make Naruto the one who killed Nagato. Conan began to ruffle her papers on her skin. They slowly began to peel off and flitter through the sky in a violent tornado. She didn't like this man's constant lies. Everything that masked man spouted was becoming more and more unbearable to hear. She couldn't understand it. Why was he causing so much pain to everyone? A fire erupted in her belly as his words churned in chaos within her mind. She turned to look at Naruto, who was staring at her in concern. A piercing cold flame sparked within her eyes that would put villains to shame. She was exhausted from the fabrications. The man who started it all was right in front of her. She would make it quick and simple to end this cycle with this man here. It's the only way the world will be at peace. No. I won't hear it. Nagato passed on his will for peace to Naruto. I won't let you sully his name. Conan's papers peeled with flittering sound that crackled throughout the sky and swirled in a vortex of white blurs. Her thoughts were clouded and left her thinking on one thing: to kill. Her anger filled her senses. It was as if she was falling into an abyss with no way to fly and break free. She was actually losing control of herself. This was completely different from the Conan weeks before. Tap, her eyes darted to the unusual weight on her form, then followed the arm to Naruto's face, who continued giving her that same look. Naruto's hand found its way to her shoulder. He was silently urging her to stop. She gasped as his touch developed a feeling of warmth through her Jonin vest. A different warmth than just a simple form of heat. She then felt clarity. She remembered that forgiving is the best way to find a peace of mind. Her eyebrows furrowed in confusion as an internal battle fought within her mind. She couldn't forget Nagato's words and his sudden change, and how easily he put his trust into Naruto. Clenching her eyes shut as the papers slowly flew back to her form, she hung her head low as she found melancholy curiosity to the ground full of snow. That's right. There was nothing that you could do to stop this from happening to your friend, or to your love, Toby replied nonchalantly to her. Now all you have are feelings of regret and wishes of what you could have done. Unfortunately, this world is cruel. It's a shame though, you should have followed in their footsteps, where you could be joined together again. Then you wouldn't still have to suffer another day in this wretched wasteland." The masked man twirled his hand around, signaling everything around them. "No one has ever survived my genjutsu. It is only a mystery to how you survived that attack." "More like a miracle," Conan thought quietly. "I think I've heard enough," Kakashi soon intervened. As interesting as the spat between the two ninja was, there were other things that needed to be found out that were more important. "I want to know why you are collecting the biju. What's your true reason?" "Ah, getting back on topic, are we?" Toby replied sarcastically. "Well, if I were to choose a reason, it would be to become a complete form." The mood fell to a darker shade from his response. "A complete form? What do you mean?" Kakashi asked curiously. Toby shook his head. "It would be pointless to tell you all. Maybe I will tell under better circumstances." It was a quite nice chat for now, but until then, later, a vortex appeared swallowing the manhole until he disappeared into nothingness, leaving an open gap in the Mokutun technique. After a few moments, the tension died, and everyone could feel the release. Conan sighed and lowered her head further. "Madara, I hate that man, Conan-chan," Naruto asked as he walked up to her. "Are you alright?" He could feel the stress coming off of his teammate in fluctuating vibes. She was troubled, but he didn't know what was exactly on her mind. The woman sniffed and wiped her eyes with her thumbs. "Yes, everything's fine. I just overreacted." She knew her actions were strange. It looked as if she might have to train herself to control her emotions again. That certainly won't be a walk in the park, because her emotions were so well tamed, and it didn't come difficult, because she grew to live that way. Before she met Naruto, it was so easy to solve that minor emotional stir, but even she didn't realize just how much it was a change for her. What she just did could have been a costly mistake on her part that would have injured Naruto or any other Leaf Shinobi that was around. Why she was acting that way, she couldn't quite figure that out. It only left her pondering over her reaction. Some time later, "Look at my cabin," an angry person yelled. Kakashi and Yamato both looked at the man. He was the owner of the cabins and looked like a fish out of water at the destruction of his beautiful property, or so he claimed it to be. "I'm sorry," Yamato replied with a sweat. "I'll fix it. I promise." "You're damn right you will. I mean, look at it. It's a mess. Ah, I just can't stand Shinobi," he cried while looking at the massive hole in his beloved cabin. Kakashi could only sigh and gaze his lone eye to the top of the cabin, where Naruto and Conan sat up there together. It was becoming ever more intriguing to watch their strange relationship from afar, and he could very well admit that something has changed within the last few days since their departure. Could they be? Nah. That kind of thing would never happen. But wouldn't it be pretty exciting if it did? Kakashi felt the need to grab a small notebook from within his back pouch and began scribbling something that would make either in question pale or blush. "I think I might continue your passion, Jiraiya-sama." Neither one of them uttered a peep. Lost in their thoughts that were floating and spinning through their minds from moments before, they sat in silence side by side. Conan was replaying what Madara kept telling her. His words were filling her head and driving her to insanity. None of what he said could have been the truth, could it? No, it's not possible. She knew the truth. Words from an untrustworthy man were not valid. She can't believe those things he was spouting off, although she couldn't help but review her life traumas. Naruto thought in silence. He just can't believe that Sasuke would actually choose that path. Why? Then again, he wanted strength. Like Madara said, Sasuke wanted strength that he felt he couldn't get from anything else but darkness. It was such a terrible and lonely way to get power, but Naruto thought about it. If he didn't have anyone there for him, he would have most likely done the same thing. Maybe in another dimension? He sighed in defeat. He should probably think on it later. His mind couldn't really handle all of the stress. He gazed in Conan's direction and felt astonished from her subconscious action. She usually tried to run away to her lonesome whenever she had problems, but here she sat, together with him, and thinking to herself, she is most likely thinking about what Madara said about Nagato, he wondered. It just didn't seem right to him. He clearly knew that Nagato wasn't lying before he died. If he was, then he was doing a really good job. That would most likely mean that Madara was the biggest compulsive liar he has ever known. Naruto knew the truth, but he started thinking that maybe Conan didn't exactly have an answer for everything. "Hey, Conan-chan, she replied distantly with her sight never leaving the snow on the roof. "Don't think too much about what Madara said, okay?" he replied, snapping her head immediately to his direction. "It's just that, well, we both know that Nagato didn't do anything wrong. He just lost his way. Just don't believe any of it. Nagato wants us to continue on the right path. We can't let anything get in our way." Including lies that bastard says, Naruto answered a little more somber in his last statement. Conan looked on with wide eyes as her glare was reciprocated. Naruto is actually the one telling her to not worry? Isn't she supposed to be the one that gives life lessons to Naruto instead? I've come a long way since we first met, haven't I? A slow, miniature smile of sadness etched its way on her face before she sighed. I suppose you're right. His words have nothing to back them. It's merely talk. I should have remembered that from the beginning. I'm sorry. She rested her head on her hand as she sat there in a hurricane of thoughts. It was a genuine apology and Naruto knew that it was, but he didn't think that Conan should have apologized. She was just being too hard on herself. Look, Naruto replied while scooting closer to Conan and placing his hand on her shoulder, you have nothing to apologize for. Take it easy. Relax. This is just something to get in our way. Just think of it as a small misfortune that's trying its best to stop us. Conan looked over in slight amusement and a glint in her eye. Since when did you become so mature? He laughed and started scratching the back of his head. I don't really know. It just sorta came out. He stopped and looked at her, but still, it's okay. We'll get through this. I will make sure that we succeed. She gave a soft smile to Naruto and his sweet innocence. She really enjoyed that upbeat attitude in her life. I would have really needed someone like you when I was younger. Before she could finish her thoughts, something caught her eye, and she looked down to Kakashi who was signaling them. Hey, Naruto. Do you need to come down? The orange-haired boy stared at Kakashi who was pointing to several figures walking up in haste, Sakura, Sai, Kiba, and even bushy brows. What are you all doing here? Sakura breathed a sigh and looked to Naruto with a determination in her eyes. Naruto, we need to talk. After a while, What did you say, Sakura-chan? I don't think I heard you correctly. Can you say it again? Naruto stood dumbfounded as he stared at his Pinket teammate. Naruto, I said, I love you, she replied with a tinge of red on her cheeks. All of the spectators, including both parties, were looking on in interest and surprise. Lee looked as if he couldn't believe it. Kakashi's lone eye gazed curiously at the new development. Yamato looked ridiculous. Sai and Kiba kept silent. Conan, however, lowered her eyelids slightly. Her face fell into a partial frown as she watched the two interact with each other. Sasuke doesn't even mean anything to me anymore, Naruto, Sakura stated with her eyes diverted to the side. I was completely at fault to ever like him anyway. Just listen to me better while I'm making my confession. Naruto stared in shock at it all. Never in a million years would he expect Sakura to just openly decide that she likes him. In his dreams, maybe, but in real life it was just impossible, and he knew it. That thought changed his ideas and he no longer felt the shock anymore, only confusion. His face held a seriousness to it that was all too different from a moment ago, and it gave him an unusual air. But why here? Why now? I don't think this is funny, Sakura. Cut the crap. What are you up to? Sakura stifled a gasp at his stare and this new tone that he added in his words. It seemed a little colder than usual. What do you mean, Naruto? Nothing's going on. I just finally woke up and realized that I can't continue loving a rogue shinobi. I'm not a child, you know. I can tell the difference between fantasy and reality. Her smile widened as she gave a grin with closed eyes. Now that we're done with that, you don't have to worry about that promise you made to me. You can stop shazzing after Sasuke. Naruto flinched at that last part and Conan noticed all too quickly. Reacting to all of this, the paper angel forced herself between the two team members, completely surprising both parties. Yamato began to object, only to have Kakashi hold him back, curious as to what Conan had to say. Excuse me, Conan-san, but I have to continue to talk to Naruto, Sakura started as she barely arched her eyebrows in confusion and anger. I can't allow you to talk to Naruto any longer, Conan said aggressively, earning a questioning look from both Sakura and Naruto. Your confession is causing Naruto a great deal of pain and confusion. I can only ask that you leave here at once. I will not stand aside and let you talk to him, as if he is simple-minded. Sakura quickly ended her facade as she stared at Conan intensely. One could hear gloves slowly wrinkling underneath the Pinket's winter robe. What? I don't talk to him like he's simple-minded. Do you really think that Naruto is that much of a fool to believe that you would fall in love with him on a whim? Why do you care? Sakura asked, staring daggers into Conan's own eyes. All you want is for Naruto to see your way. We all know what you are doing. Conan's eyes widened at her statement. She was still going on about that? I'm doing nothing of the sort. Really? Sakura said smugly, ever since you appeared, Naruto has been changing. He's not the same blonde-headed knucklehead that I used to know. He's become colder, and his hair has even become orange. Isn't it a coincidence that his hair would turn the same color that Pain's hair was? Conan was still in denial about Naruto's hair color. She was still trying to cope with that fact, and Sakura wasn't making it better. All he ever talks about is Conan this and Conan that. I don't entirely understand it. You were the enemy. Why are you even here? Why did you change Naruto so much? Sakura shook her head in disbelief. Well, I guess when you hang around a cold bitch long enough, you turn colder. Slap. Everyone's eyes widened exponentially as they saw Conan's hand glide across Sakura's face, making the pink-haired girl falter slightly and wince from the pain. It took the girl a moment, but she looked up and saw Conan with anger and sadness etched on her face. You have no right saying such things about me. How dare you? I've been nice this entire time, and you've only slandered about me. You haven't once given me an opportunity to prove my truth and trustworthiness. It would be in your best interest if you just left Naruto and myself alone. I think we've both had enough of your lies. You bitch. I'm not even the one that's lying. You've been lying to Naruto. Sakura. She turned her head and saw Naruto with a fierce look contorted in his features. She went wide-eyed as she turned a shade of white that was similar to the color of a hospital blanket. She never saw Naruto this angry, especially if it was directed at her. He didn't even add the chan suffix at the end of her name. What was this, Naruto? Naruto, you don't mean, I think it's time that you take your leave, Sakura, Naruto replied through grinding teeth. I don't like what you're saying about Conan-chan. You don't know anything about her, and she is right. You've only said bad things about her and put her down the entire time. There's nothing more you can say. With that, he left the scene fuming, and Conan, who looked over and saw his reaction, followed in silence. Their footsteps dissipated as Sakura struggled to find words that would bring Naruto back to her. Sakura looked over to Kakashi and Yamato and gave them a silent plea for help. They only shook their heads as the gray-haired Jounin spoke up. Sakura, you know very well that Konan-sen is doing her best to become part of the Leaf Village. She's right when she said that you haven't given her a chance. Sakura looked back to Conan, who was talking to Naruto quietly but sadly, and then back at Kakashi. You don't actually believe that Conan is on our side, do you? I can't be entirely confident about that, but my opinions do not matter at this point. Kakashi spoke as the girl softened her facial features, but she does have the support from Tsunade-sama, and she has also been tested and interrogated. Basically, there is no evidence that claims she will turn Naruto or stray him. She actually wants to help. Sakura. Maybe you should try and trust her? Sakura didn't know that she was tested. She fell silent as she got lost in her thoughts. Could all of her assumptions be false after all? Naruto's hair turning orange is actually a coincidence? Could Naruto be acting cold because of me? Maybe he hasn't changed at all. Maybe I've been the one that has changed. I guess I have no choice. I will kill Sasuke myself and fix this mess. Come on, Sai, Kiba, and Lee. Sakura shouted to the others as she turned her heel and went the opposite direction. She couldn't help but feel like she was to blame for Naruto's attitude towards her. She couldn't handle his cold stare. It was the death of her to see the brightest glowing person that she knew to turn so cold, dark, and callous. She has to fix this, even if it kills her. A lone tear fell from her eye as she tried to staunch the feelings from erupting forth. I'm so sorry, Naruto. Naruto watched his teammate turn and leave, and he couldn't help but feel a little ashamed of Sakura's actions. How could she say such cruel things about Conan? He only shook his head as he turned back to the blue-haired woman that was looking at him in return. There was some type of emotion that could be seen within her softened amber eyes, but it looked like she was restraining herself more than standing still. Conan sighed as she looked at the orange-haired boy in sadness. You didn't have to do that. I could have handled it myself. I couldn't just let her talk about you like that, Conan-chan. Someone has to stand up for you. You don't always have to do things alone. Okay? He smiled softly after the last part. She gazed into his eyes and saw that same warmth she saw several times before. She couldn't help but curve her lips upward from his infectious grin. It always did that to her, but she didn't mind it. It actually calmed her whenever her emotions began to take shape. During this moment, something warm enveloped her heart, and she could only feel the urge to hug Naruto, but her restraint was quite heavy. She couldn't be doing these things in front of the other ninja. They would think that something was going on. She pushed the feeling down before she sighed with her unknowingly cute smile. Okay, Naruto-kun. Naruto-san. The boy in question turned his head and saw Sai standing in front of them. He held a serious manner. What are you doing here, Sai? I came here to tell you the real reason why Sakura-san came here to you, Sai replied urgently. Naruto was right. There was another reason why Sakura came here besides making that confession. Sakura really was trying to do something else. What real reason?
End of chapter 13.